Tiger Brands is opposing 2 applications for class action lawsuits over the listeriosis outbreak. More than 190 people have died as a result of the foodborne illness. Let's get a bit more detail on the story. ENCA's Erin Bates is following it for us. So Erin, it seems the Institute for Communicable Diseases is adamant that the outbreak began in Enterprise's Polokwane factory. Why would Tiger Brands be contesting this?
I'm sure there are legal grounds for contesting the source as being that Polokwane plant and the production of Enterprise foods there. But that point from the NICD is reiterated by the World Health Organization. They agree that almost all the cases that have been identified in South Africa come from meat products at that Polokwane plant, which we must note was closed down after things sort of blew open on listeriosis. So the plan is to clean it up, to deal with the presence of the bacteria at the plant and then reopen it down the line. But the latest NICD figures indicate that 191 people have died. Over 40% of the identified cases of listeriosis are in newborn children, and 191 people have died following the consumption of contaminated food products.
All right, so let's look at this legal reason that Tiger Brands is then putting forward for contesting this case that's being brought.
I spoke to the spokesperson for Tiger Brands this morning, Navashni Naika. She's emphasized that what they're opposing at this point is the existence of 2 class action applications. So those class action lawsuits are not underway as such as yet. What 2 law firms have done is gone to the South Gauteng High Court and asked for the court's permission to bring forth class action lawsuits. And a class action lawsuit is essentially a lawsuit on behalf of a group. So what Tiger Brands is saying is we can't respond to 2 cases relating to a single group. We'd rather respond to a single consolidated case from this group, this class of people who've been affected by the listeriosis outbreak.
So it's simply a legal technicality at this point. It's not, Tiger Brands is not opposing the lawsuit, the merits of a case per se.
Exactly. So Tiger Brands has said as a responsible corporate citizen, they will respond in due course to the actual application and the actual lawsuit if it gets underway, if the court allows for this application to be brought forward, but it will respond to a single class action lawsuit, and that's still to come down the line. But since this news broke of these lawsuits, one on the 14th of March from LHL attorneys, and then the Richard Spoor case, which we reported on at the end of March, the number of people Richard Spoor's attorneys are representing has increased. So initially they'd said there were about 70 people that they were representing. That number has now increased to 107. But on paper, the 10 applicants who represent this broader class is 10 people.
All right. So let's just get into some of the nitty-gritties, the information that's now emerging in the wake of this outbreak, of the damage it actually did to people.
If you look at those papers that were put forth by the Richard Spoor attorneys when they went to court, it's absolutely damning in terms of the consequences of listeriosis infections. And it's particularly bad for the elderly and women who are expecting children. Women who contract or develop a listeriosis infection while pregnant go on to have very complicated pregnancies. Often the children are born premature or with congenital conditions, and in some cases, it's specifically in the South African case, women have had children with congenital problems in the spinal cord. One woman had a child who was born brain dead and had to be taken off life support the following day. The consequences are extreme, and they are absolutely severe for women and newborn children. And I think it's important to underline here, Joanne, that this is the most serious, most widespread instance of listeriosis outbreak in the world. The body count is the highest and the number of infections is the highest. And that's precisely why the World Health Organization is now consulting with South African authorities and other authorities in the SADC region to try and ring-fence these infected products and recall them for destruction.
So an important question that emerges from what you've just told us, is this outbreak over?
It's not, and that's because there's a lifespan on the goods that are produced and may contain the listeriosis bacterium, but also because they can contaminate other foodstuffs. So if you have polony in your fridge that has the listeriosis bacterium in it, it can then infect other foodstuffs. And one of the issues here is that Enterprise Foods exports some of the meats that are thought to contain listeriosis around the SADC region. In fact, according to the World Health Organization, as far as Nigeria. So recalling those products is absolutely fundamental, and then also destroying them. They have to be held at -18 degrees, and then they're burned at the 2000 degrees. And Tiger Brands has told us and emphasized to me that they are doing that recall. They've destroyed so far 3,700 tons of meat products considered to possibly be contaminated nationally. So they've pulled in those 3,700 tons of these meat products and burned them at 2,000 degrees.
All right. There's just one last question I have for you, Erin, and that is the problem, the worries that appear to be arising over the issue of disposal and destruction. Why are scientists worried about that?
Because the virus is quite robust, so the bacterium, I should say, is quite robust. It needs to be destroyed under very controlled conditions. And that's why there's a very important sort of chain of management from the recall to the actual destruction in these 5 plants. Tiger Brands does not want to disclose the location of the plants because they're concerned, one, that people might try and take the foodstuffs thinking, well, it's worth the risk and we're so hungry and desperate we'll just eat them, and also because it's such a sensitive case. But those foodstuffs need to be burned at very high temperatures in order to remove the bacterium in full, and they also need to scrape the plant in Polokwane and any other plants where they're concerned that the listeriosis bacterium may have been present. But what we still don't know is where and how the listeriosis bacterium got to be so active in that Polokwane plant. And the World Health Organization has emphasized that reports that the source was some kind of product from Brazil are not proven as yet. So we know things go back as far as the Polokwane plant and the enterprise food production there, but beyond that we're still not clear on how the listeriosis bacterium emerged in that plant, and it raises very serious questions around food and safety, around the interplay between government and the private sector in food production, and how this managed to happen for so long. The World Health Organization reports date back to 2017. We're now in the first quarter of 2018. We have 191 dead people, many of them newborn babies, and there are still serious questions here around how this all began and got to the scale it's at, which is a body count higher than life Esidimeni, which we've widely reported as a tragedy.